positioned very well for what we call infill housing. And basically what that means is a piece of property that has been developed around, and there's a lot of services in existing. So it makes sense to want to put higher density in an area where there's already services that exist, and there's already that kind of density there. The location itself is also close to commercial properties, the closest commercial property being within 160 meters. This falls within some of council's priorities as well, in which they talk about high density residential being adjacent or being used as a transition barrier between different types of residential and commercial uses. Okay, so this is a zoning map here that you can see on the screen, and it is cut off, I apologize. So this is just showing the different types of zoning that's in the area. So we have some single-family residential zoning, which is the yellow there. We have 2-unit residential zoning, which would be kind of that salmon pink color. And then the bright red would be R3, which is what the property is currently zoned, and that's medium density residential, which permits up to 8 units. And then the property that we're talking about is in that maroon color right now. So if it were to be rezoned, it would be that darker color, and that would allow for high density residential. And the proposal that we've received is for a development that would be between 30 and 60 units and would be community based on market demand. Originally, the applicants considered that there was a high possibility that they would be targeting students based on the location to the NSCC. However, in further discussions, I think they're open to renting and possibly a development that meets other market ages and types. The proposal itself is very much in line with all of council's housing policies when it comes to their goals, objectives related to infill housing. So the fact that the property is located where it is, close to services, as I talked about before, but it also falls within council's objectives and goals when it comes to creating a diverse housing stock with various designs to service the needs of residents. So that is the statement that council has in their policies, is what they're looking for is developers to come in who are looking at doing something that's different and offers a different type and style that could be lived in and enjoyed by new residents. So just from a request perspective, just so we understand what we're considering tonight, the applicant is requesting that they be permitted to be allowed higher density on the lot. That's really the question tonight, is what would be the appropriate amount of housing units for this property. The second question that's really under consideration for council is, does this proposal align with council's priorities? Does it fit with what they say that they want within their planning documents? So how does this affect you as a community? So if council approves this rezoning application, and we're in very early stages, as Darren showed on that slide at the very beginning, we're at the public participation program part of this application. That is very early. This is when council really gets the opportunity to hear from the public. There's will be more opportunities in the future if this application continues to move forward. We're still at the council advisory committee stage in consideration. So on Friday, we'll be looking at potentially making a recommendation to council to consider, and at that point, if it moves to council, then there would be an option for a public hearing as well. And all of this is ifs as we move along and council hears from you and your opinions and thoughts. So what I want to really get into your heads because there's quite a large report that came with this, and the developers have a few ideas and thoughts about what they would like to do on the property, and they were included as part of the application. However, what's really important to note here is that if the property were to be rezoned to high-density residential, the developer could potentially go through any development design or construction. So those are options. They're not what are being considered. What's being considered is the level of density that would be appropriate on the lot. And the reason for that is because once that decision has been made around the density level, then council can then the applicant, if it's been approved, would be permitted to be considered to construct on the property. And the way that they'd be considered is through site plan approval. And site plan approval is a tool that council has put within their planning documents. And what it means is that the development officer has a list of criteria, and that criteria is what they use to evaluate a final designer for a development when it comes in for application. And so they'll go through and they'll check the list and make sure that the development meets all of that criteria set by council. And then the neighboring properties will be notified that a site plan approval has been issued for that property, and they're given an opportunity to appeal to council. From there, if there is an appeal to council, it would be heard at council, and they're able to make any decision that the development officer would have made. So they can decide to approve the site plan and move forward with it. They can agree with the grievances that are heard and perhaps ask for more information from the developer or a change in the design of the development, or they can simply decline it. So that's how site plan approval works, and that would be the next stage of the process for construction if this property were permitted to allow this type of density. So basically, part of the approval process will be to assess whether the design meets council's requirements. And some of those include providing indoor and outdoor amenity spaces, preserving existing vegetation, ensuring adequate parking and signage. The design also gets evaluated to determine if the development aligns with the existing residential neighborhood. And it's all in accordance with policy 5.1.12, which is the site plan criteria for development in residential areas. And that's what was provided, or should have been provided on the handout to you as you came in. So there are copies of that. But just so everybody has kind of an idea of what that looks like, I've also included a list on my slideshow. So I'm just wondering if it would help if I highlighted a few of these before we get into discussion. So part of a site plan is that the location of new structures are located so as to minimize any adverse impacts on the surrounding neighborhood, including but not limited to noise, dust, and lighting. The location of off-street parking and loading facilities are located and designed to minimize adverse impact on the surrounding neighborhood. The location, number, and width of ingress and egress points are designed to prevent traffic congestion, nuisance, inconveniences in the area, and minimize any adverse impacts on the surrounding neighborhood. The type, location, height of walls, hedges, fences, trees, shrubs, ground cover, or other landscaping elements are designed and built so as to protect and minimize any adverse impacts on neighboring properties. The existing vegetation, wherever possible and deemed practical, be retained so as to lessen or reduce any adverse impact on abutting properties or the surrounding neighborhood. The location of pedestrian walkways and/or related infrastructure shall be provided to link public walkways and parking areas to the entrance of the primary building. The type and location of outdoor lighting is designed to light the structured driveways and any pedestrian walkways, but shall not be directed onto neighboring properties. The location of facilities for the storage of solid waste provides for a maximum separation of residential developments, public areas, and adjacent properties. The location of existing easements shall be identified. The management of storm and surface water is addressed, and associated plans are approved by the town engineer. The type, location, number, and size of signs or sign structures do not negatively alter the appearance of the neighborhood. And then the above listed items are maintained in a manner suitable and complementary to the surrounding neighborhood. So that is the criteria that the developer would be held to with their final design. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Darren and let you move on.
Thank you, Caroline. Just an opportunity for the developer. If you want to say anything now, don't feel pressured into that, but we can wait till we get to questions if there's ones that are specifically for you as well. Just to give you that opportunity now. But if you're good, we can open it up to everyone. This is where I get to walk around. So start fielding any questions that you may have or comments. Don't leave me standing here too long. Oh, sorry about that.
Where are the plans for what this developer may want to build? Where are the plans for 30 units? Where's the plans for the 60 units?
Right, at this point, we're talking about rezoning, so the actual design comes at a later point, and there's another process for seeing. That's what she was talking about with the site plan approval process.
I can't believe the developer would go this far without having something to look at.
Does the developer wish to speak to that? Hang on. Just because we're putting this up on the web, we have to make sure everyone's heard here.
Yeah, no, it's, I mean, we have a 7-acre site altogether happening there. So the vision is to do a mix of different types of housing on the site. So we have some townhouses built, now we're building some 1-bedrooms and 3-bedrooms. So for the rest of the land, you know, I'm sure everybody's feeling, you know, the pinch of, you know, everyone knows people that are living through housing insecurity right now. And so what we're trying to do is to build something that's going to be able to lower the cost of rentals and lower the cost of building and construction. So the two different things we're kind of looking at right now, though, like everybody said, it's not set in stone because there's a lot of things to look at before we can decide. But this would be to build, you know, a multi-unit building on the side of New Road, or to build small little units along right along that south side on that ridge. So it would be less height but more distance. So we're looking at both options. And
They're small units.
it would be between, you know, 300 to 700 square feet. Again, it's really, we're just speculating at this point. We have to do a lot of different, you know, look at the whole thing. But definitely density is the way to reduce cost. So that's the biggest thing. The 8-unit buildings like we're doing right now, they're expensive. There's a lot more roofs per unit, there's more siding per unit. So it's all a cost approach. We don't need to build a lot of units there, but we want to because the density will help to lower the cost and have housing that's affordable for people that live in the area. So that's really the idea behind that. So.
Thanks very much. Any other questions, comments?
Loretta Maxwell, 32 Hillcrest Avenue. My husband, when he sold the land to the developer, we were under the pretense that it was for condominiums, which would be bought and not units, but okay, so that changed. And then we noticed that the property was up for sale. So now that changed. So now we're on to, I guess, like Plan C, maybe, I think, I'm not sure. But we keep changing, and who's to say that this is actually what is going to be happening? And personally, I don't want it to be happening. There's a lot of young families on that street right now, and I've lived there for 40 years. And I've raised my kids there, and I know there's a number of neighbors behind me that have too. And this is not the outlook. And if my father-in-law, if he could see what's gonna be happening to this land right now, he would be mortified. So that's my comment, and I will never approve or like or want 30 to, and I don't, parking, like 30 to 40 mini homes, parking, that would definitely be an issue, because I know what's left to that land, and it's a very narrow strip, and they're not gonna come down through that cul-de-sac there. So anyway, that's my little rant, and thank you for listening.
Richard Maxwell, husband. I'm just wondering about these the tiny homes. Like 56 seems like a lot. So it's like a mobile home park. Is that what it is going to be, or is it going to be like a? What are we looking at? Yeah.
That's that one.
No, it would be mobile home. It would be a multi-unit building, which is, it would be more, if you could imagine a row housing type scenario. So it would be small footprint, but in a long distance. So I'm getting ahead of myself because, yeah, they would be connected. Yeah. Exactly. The advantage of that is it wouldn't be as high, but
It's not small 300 square foot. It's not.
no, it would probably be like more like a row, like the R4 would, it would be a row house type setup. So, I mean, we could also come up with another. We really don't know at this point. We're really going ahead, but I know a lot of people were asking, so I figured I'd throw in a couple ideas.
Hi, Ian. While we have you here, is it okay to ask a couple of questions that we have about the current part of the development where we're at, like a few things? They kind of tie into the new plans in a sense. So in the thought of the tiny homes, roughly how much space would you have to have between them? Like legally, what's the requirement for spacing between the tiny homes? I just wonder because, see the little yellow square in between all the brown and the red with the little pink house? That's our little house. So we have the development property on all sides of our little tiny house. And that's something that we didn't actually get to know about when we bought our house. We actually had zero knowledge that a development was going to happen when we made our purchase. So we lived in our house for about a month, and then we got the first notification. So we had to kind of stomach that initially, and it was hard for us. We made it happen. We live there still, obviously. We love where we live. We don't know what our long-term looks like because we have so many questions about what's going to happen around us. I realize things are in planning stages and that those questions are hard to answer. But I guess part of why I wonder with the spacing is I'm wondering approximately, if you had to guess, how far across the back piece would this strip go? We're wondering how much green space is required because we really want to know what would be kind of behind us. And one of the things that we did find was a picture my husband found online of a general idea of an L-shaped building that was along Mee Road, and we were wondering if that's something that could be shared. I mean, we could find it quite easily online, but it was sort of a general idea, and we were wondering if that was what you were thinking for that L-shaped building. Have more questions too, but if you want to start with that.
So try to get in the middle here again. Caroline, are you looking up any of that?
So there's no, I don't see building separation. I don't see specifically building separation in the land use bylaw. However, it would need to meet those site plan criteria about addressing how it fits within the neighborhood. There are requirements for multi-unit dwellings that are built together in a townhouse style, and that's more requirements around how it's set back in the lot. I have the diagram of the L-shaped building, but I would have to email that to Jennifer again to get it up on the slide, so it might take a minute. I can keep searching for building separation.
Pretty sure it's 20 feet, but it would be good to get a confirmation on.
Well, there's fire code and building code does have requirements Fire code and building code do have requirements about building separation, so there's a standard anyway that is always required between buildings. But council is permitted to adopt a building separation as well within their land use bylaw, so that's what I'm trying to find in addition to that requirement. So there might be larger than what would be required by fire code.
So we can get back to that question.
Okay, Karen Conrad, I have a question. Do we have any R4 in Kentville presently? Do we have any high density that you can say it'll resemble this in some way? It'll be like that. Do we presently have R4 high density?
Thank you. We do. Miners Landing is the whispered answer. I'm not as good with directions. David?
Down at the east end of town, across from the research station, on your way to New Minas, those are apartment buildings in the R4 zone.
Okay.
So that's an example of R4, but R4 just means higher than 8 unit essentially. So I mean, be careful. R3 is up to 8 unit per building, but you could have multiple R3s on one lot.
Is there a limit on how much R4 can be?
It's limited to the size of the lot and again, separations.
Can they put in a high rise and put 30 to 60 units in 2 different buildings with R4 zoning based on the size of that lot? Could that happen?
I would pass that over to our planning consultant to talk about what's in the R4 LUB. So many units per area, I believe, is part of it.
Yeah, so in the R4 zone, permitted is single unit detached dwellings, 2 unit dwellings, daycare centers, nursery schools, residential care facilities, homes for special care or group homes, and multi-unit dwellings. There's R4 zone requirements related for minimum lot size, which this lot does meet. And then there's also frontage and yard setbacks, as well as all of that site plan criteria that we went through.
You know the rules better than I do. I can go home and Google it up, yes, but.
I haven't been provided with final designs, so I have not put in
Do
the.
you not know, just never mind their design. If I can tell you, you can build a high rise and put 30 units in each one. Would they be allowed to do that if we go with?
If they met every aspect of that criteria within your site plan approval process, which a high unit building, 2 units of a certain height, may not meet that criteria. It depends on what design comes forward. It depends on how the development officer evaluates it. It depends on what the neighbors think, and it depends on council's decision if there's an appeal. So that's the process that's in place for that kind of design. But based on council's priorities, yes, this kind of density fits in that area, and it does fit within the law requirements. The final design and what that looks like, I'm not sure.
A quick follow-up on that, excuse me while I kneel. So more than one lot on a unit, or more than one unit on a lot, you need to have 20 feet in between each of the units as part of our land use bylaw. And I just want to speak to the minimum lot areas. So for a multi-unit dwelling, 5 or more units are it's 7,000 square feet for the first 5 units and 1,000 feet square per unit after that. So the size of the lot determines how many units can go on that lot.
Did you not say that's 7 acres?
You're gonna make me do math.
It's 88,000 square feet.
Well, yeah.
It's a lot.
It's not 7 acres? No.
The entire site.
Oh, the entire site, that is 2 acres. Yeah, an acre is around 48,000 square feet. Might be 44 point something, but anyway, that's 2 acres.
So certainly, like I said.
Just to answer, to help answer the previous question from somebody before, that square on the left side is going to be a community park, and we've already reached out to the town of Kentville and Parks and Recreation to help design something. There's going to be do public outreach in order to see what the people around the area, because that'll be available to everybody around the neighborhood. And so we're gonna help build that, put that together.
Back corner again.
So I just had a quick question. In terms of like your goals for this development, if you were to get approved for the rezoning and say you convert it to R4, is the max amount you can build 60 units? Or can you build multiple 60-unit buildings? Or is that like the max amount that you get from the R4 conversion? I do have another question after too.
So for the maximum unit yield, it goes back to that formula that I talked about earlier, that you can get 7,000 square feet for the first 5 units, then 1,000 square feet for each unit additionally. So that sets the maximum. So it's based again on the lot size that they're looking at developing. So that's the ceiling for it.
So like for the maximum amount, that's what they can get, is 60 units?
No, I can't do the math right now, but
Okay. Okay. And then the other question I had was, on your website, there's a lot of proposal around community gardens and a pizza oven and a walking trail, all that sort of stuff. So my question is, like, if you're planning on giving back to the area around, do you have any insight as to where that would be? Because I know the lot is filling up pretty quick from all the foundations that I see. So I'm just out of curiosity, where most of the green space that I see is pretty much in our backyard. Just wondering if that would be a spot where you would put it, or if you had any insight to that as well.
thank you for the question. I'll leave design up to you if you want to speak to it.
Sure, yeah. I don't know if I can answer the whole question, but yeah, aside from the park, there is a requirements to put buffer zones and tree lines, and the design of that 2-acre lot needs to be done so that it feels good, looks good. So there's a lot of space there. If we put more density, the nice thing about more density is that there's more space for green space. Right now, if that R4, potentially R4 lot, stayed R3, what we would be able to do, not sure we'd be into it, but would be to build 6 or 7 eightplexes spread out all over that land. So when that happens, then you're taking up more space, and then there's less left over for green space. So the idea of density is to leave more area open. And so it feels a little different maybe than what you're used to in the neighborhood, but it lowers the cost of housing and it helps people. Obviously, if the cost goes down, then the rent goes down, and then so we'll be left over with more space to create what we want to create there.
Okay, this is a question for council. How many units are in Miners Marsh?
And how much land area was used? If I haven't already asked that question. 225 units, and how much land? No, at Miners Marsh, how much land?
Yeah, I don't know if we could pull that up on the spot here. One second.
We don't have plans to build over, we had, our first proposal was 60 units, so we don't have any plans to go over that. It'd be too prohibitive.
Hi everyone, my name is Kate, I'm on council. Just so with the R3 zoning that you have now, per 10,000 square feet on that R3, you can build 8 units, correct? 8 units every 10,000 square feet, correct? Yeah, okay. Yeah.
You could build 48 units now if it remains R3. No.
Yeah, 64.
8 units per.
Oh, you're saying no, so
Did you say 8,000?
maybe I misunderstood, so I'll get clarity.
8,000 square feet?
88,000.
Who was,
Oh, 80.
88,000.
That's the size of a
In the R3 zone currently, multi-unit dwellings, 5 to 8 units, have to have 10,000 square feet. And they also are required to have a minimum road frontage, which is for multi-unit, it's 100 feet of road frontage. So I'm thinking they're getting pretty close. There's not a whole lot of units that could be placed in the R3 zone there with the existing lot size.
Can you repeat that for me again? They have to have 100 square feet and the unit.
They have to have 100 feet road frontage to build up to 8 units.
In R3.
Yes, in the R3 zone. That's their existing zoning.
So do they have any road frontage now?
So they have road frontage on the avenue and then also on Me Road.
Right, yeah.
Just to correct you a little bit, Caroline, we're building 5 plexes there now, there's only 100 feet of road frontage for those 5 units per lot. So,
Yeah, it's per lot, so if you did, it depends on how, if you subdivide or not, yeah. I apologize
But how
if that
much
wasn't
space
clear.
do you need to put another road in?
There's not space for a road.
No.
That's the point from the R3 zoning. I don't think it would be possible to get the kind of density that they're asking. That's based on lot requirements. That's why they're requesting a
So
rezoning.
there really is no way except to go up. Some multi-unit thing that's gonna be up, not sprawl.
No, because we're talking about the lot requirements for R3, which is what I was asked about. So their current zoning, this is the requirements based on their current zoning for up to 8 units. And R3 does permit multiple units on a lot, but they have to be separated, as Darren stated earlier.
And R4 permits,
I have a couple of concerns, and the first concern is about the disruption of the construction. So when Highview Court was put into this very residential, mature, tree neighborhood, it was basically a summer of discontent where dump trucks went continuously up and down a residential road of dog walkers, carriage pushers, garden growers, and it went up and down continuously, gears grinding, smoke belching, and dust being spread everywhere. This went on for hour after hour, day after day, week after week. After that was over, the big long trucks came that carry lumber and other building materials. These are very long trucks, and they are rumbling up the roads through the neighborhood, navigating these very small corners in this residential neighborhood. This went on week after week, day after day. It was a summer of discontent. I did, inside the house because sitting outside, you could hear the machinery grinding against the habitat, against the environment. The birds stopped singing, and you could hear the trees cracking down all the time from being pushed by this machinery. It was hard to sit outside and enjoy your yard nature. That was tough, and I wondered really about the permissions of all of those trucks rumbling all summer up and down our neighborhood. But we weathered it, as a lady over there said, we weathered it. And now we're being faced with it again, perhaps. The second concern is habitat. One of the things that we have to consider now is when you take away green space that's there, vacant lots where mice and squirrels run and owls hunt and eagles hunt, you start to lose your habitat. I no longer hear the owls anymore. We have a court named after an owl, but which no longer exists because its habitat is being taken away. Now, I guess I'm losing my train of thought here, but I am concerned about the habitat because we're not seeing the pheasants, we're not seeing the owls, we're not hearing the birds. The other thing is that I think we have to consider extreme weather now, so that when you take down a certain percentage of trees, you leave us what is required, but hurricanes will take care of a lot of what you leave us. And so that level of consideration of extreme weather has to be applied to how many trees you're taking down now and how much is going to be brought down by hurricanes and floods and other extreme weather forces. Lighting, again, another habitat problem for all our birds in nature. And I guess, you know, my final consideration, Highwood Court, named after an owl, no more owls. Mountain View Street, I don't know how high these things are gonna come, but we may not be able to see the tops of the trees or the tops of the mountains, or they will be obstructed by views at the tops of condos. Right now, this mature neighborhood with treed neighborhood is becoming a sprawl of incongruous, lovely trees, lovely neighborhood, bare condominiums, modern, and it's becoming a dichotomy and an incongruous sprawl leveled out to be, I don't know what the identity of it is anymore. So, destruction with construction and extreme destruction of habitat. And those are my concerns. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I'll go with Kat.
Thank you. I'd just like a couple of clarification points, please. Kathy, I'm a counselor. Either Darren or CAO or the mayor, somebody could answer this question, but I was under the impression that there was a radius around the neighborhood that was supposed to receive notification of this meeting. And I'm just wondering how many residents here received a notification in the mail? Okay, so basically the neighbors heard about it and then went around, and this is what they were able to get one day before. I don't think that's adequate. The other thing that I wondered, we mentioned that it was surrounded by R1, or a lot of R1, but they were mostly rentals. I lived in that area for a good number of years, and there's very few rentals. Those are all single-family homes with families. And even down behind, which I know is in the County of Kings, again, is all single-family homes. So you're not looking at an area already with rentals. So I just wanted to make that point clear so that council understood that, because that's a little bit misleading. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I'll try to address the issue of notice. And from my understanding, and this isn't going to be a popular answer, is that in our policy we don't have a radius notification for a rezoning application. We do for other types of applications, and that can be something we can certainly look at in the future, but I followed what I understood was our own policy on this by having newspaper and social media notification for this one, so that's on me. Thank you. Any other hand? Go up front.
Hi, we live on Elizabeth Drive, which is on the northern part of this development. And one of the issues or discussion topics on here is the management of storm and surface water. With the existing buildings that they've already put in and the existing construction that they've already done that's failed, we have water damage, and as do the people on the opposite side of Elizabeth Drive. So with the small number of units that they've already built and water management isn't being taken care of, what's gonna happen when that huge development comes in? Like, anybody on the north side of that development is gonna drown. The water's just all going right down towards us. So we've got damage now. How much more damage is gonna happen to our houses that have existed there for a very long time? So we would just like to know what the proposal is for water management.
That's slightly out of my area, but Dave, do you want to speak to that on how this has been handled over the course of this development? Well, it is related to this application, so.
Thanks, Darren. I don't have a lot to add to the proposal to upzone the current piece from 3 to 4. Not sure what you experienced, if you're still experiencing stormwater issues, or if that was something during construction. I haven't heard of anything current.
We had flooding when it was grade level. Okay? And there's a natural spring there. There's a natural spring and it is buried. So now our shed height is 8 feet. The grade is 12 feet from our lot line in Elizabeth is 10 feet. And they're still not done to the main grade to the road. And they stop 12 feet from our lot line. So when they go that grade, they're gonna have to naturally slope it, and it's all going to our backyard. We've already had water. I talked to Ian last year, and we discussed it. I've heard nothing more. They put up a piece of plastic to hold back a natural spring and water. So I'd like to see what an engineer proposal for water.
Yeah. Certainly haven't heard anything on the proposed engineering for the rezone. Yeah. So are you immediately north of the existing, on the corner? Yeah. On the corner, the corner that's being infilled now.
Okay. Right now, the grade right from the main road is right to our back there, just a funnel, natural funnel.
Okay.
So I discussed it with Ian last year, and we put up black plastic and a few stakes, and that was the issue.
Okay.
You remember the conversation I had? Remember? I said I was gonna be nice the first time? Oh, no, not gonna be nice. No, I remember there was a big storm we had. How many storms you had since? And you told me you would look after that. So I took you for your, oh, no, that's fine. And now you buried a natural spring. Okay. And there's more waste containers there now. No, they're not there. Where did they go? Natural springs, just to look at our dimension. You knew, I just looked it up. I used to be farmland, that's a natural spring. So now it's not too long, which is my backyard. You have issues right now. Not right now. But now you've got your grade 2 feet higher than my shed's 8 feet high. You're not out in the road here. And you stop, so what's your proposal for water? There's no ditch, no nothing. That whole length that you got built, there's no ditch.
We just recently filled in, so.
Look, right from when you started. There's no swale, no nothing. Where's the water's all laying there. You guys gotta have a place to put your water. You can't keep building more. You can't look after what you got. I mean, I'm fair. No, there's a lot. I had discussion. I said I'd be fair. That you never approached me again or said anything. I took you for your word. So now I'm speaking against you. No, I played your game. I'm not gonna play well.
No, there's no, we'll look at it.
If you look at the info that's happening on your house, there's a manhole supposed to be end of Hebrew Court, and the infill's all being made towards the end of the road to the east.
Because Beach Road is higher than Hebrew Court.
No, but
If you get an actual break, it's gotta come back.
Right, there's a whole piece below it, and there's stormwater management listed. So we're trying to get all the water grade from behind your house back towards Hebrew Court.
Yeah, but you stop 12 feet from the lot line with 10 feet of fill, you're not done yet. That's not. Yeah, you're still filling. You can't
Okay,
fill
guys.
that lot line, stop. You're still gonna have 10 feet of fill.
I understand the concern here. For this particular application, and I realize there's maybe implications.
It does prove that.
Yeah.
If they're gonna continue that and don't care about the other people, what are you gonna do with this adjournment?
Yeah.
I'm not kidding you.
No, I hear you.
It's a environmental issue before you continue clean up one act, and then we'll look at the.
I'm just going to continue to take questions. We have your comments, so we appreciate those.
I have a question. It's kind of right now, and it sort of does still have to do with everything. So we have 3 small kids, and when we bought the house, it was just obviously field trees, mature trees next to us. We honestly don't even really mind that much that there's a building next to us. But what we do mind, due to the height of the building and how close it needed to be to the house, they had to cut into the field beside the property line and dig deep down. So we have a bungalow and then the 3-story next to us. We appreciate that it's dug down, sort of, to make it not look quite as tall. We understand the thought behind it and to fit as many as possible. We understand people need places to live. But what our problem is that we were told that there would be a safe fence along the property line where the rock embankment is, and I really mean it. It is quite a tall rock wall. It's high. The children who live next door play on it. Their parents are constantly asking them to get down. I'm constantly terrified when I walk out that somebody's kid is about to fall off it because they really do play on it. We keep our kids away from it. One of them isn't old enough yet to fall off the rock wall. I hope when she starts toddling around the yard that she doesn't. The fence that's there right now, there was a gentleman installing a fence. I thought it was some type of temporary fence. It's like this tall. It's just a little metal thing with big squares. You could like stick a kid's head through these holes. Anyway, I asked him about it, like when would the permanent fence be coming, and he told me this was the permanent fence. 1, it's ugly. 2, it's dangerous, and it's not what we were told. It's not what we expected. So our question is, when is there going to be something better there to protect all the kids in our neighborhood, mine and the kids next door who live there now? And secondly, when is the gate going to happen? Because a lot of people move the temporary gate and drive right through there fast. They hit the big bumps and holes on their way through. People walk across my neighbor's yard instead of having anywhere to get through. If there was a permanent gate with a gap for walking and pedestrians and that was accessible for people to go through, that would be okay with us. But we're waiting and we're waiting and we're waiting. We've been looking at what we call it Mount Dirt, the giant mountain of dirt in the far back corner, to the left of the picture if you're on the bylaw. And we've been wondering, when does that have to go? Because every time it rains, the water washes down the street and in front of our driveway. We literally have to sweep the bottom of the driveway every time we get heavy rain. It just floods across. And now, as of the last couple weeks, we've been watching mountain by mountain by mountain of new dirt piles going across the field behind us, and it just blows down into our yard when the kids are outside playing. We have a pool that we can't use because it's just full of dirt, because you can't keep your pool covered 99% of the time to stop the dirt from just landing in it as it sails through the sky. So yeah, we're wondering about Mount Dirt and the gate and the fence, specifically. I feel like there was something else, but now it's escaped me. It is quite a lot. It feels like a lot sometimes. Oh, and why does it say Hillcrest where it is Hibu? Why is the road just continued with no gate in that drawing? Does that mean something or not? And also, did we ever find the L-shaped picture? Because my husband can just pass it around if not. If we can't find it to pull it up. But yeah, the gate, the gate and the fence and dirt.
Yeah, that's, our maps aren't always, we pull from different sources first of all, but. No, it's a.
One of the stipulations is not the gate. That gate was supposed to be put in when the development was underway. Because the Purelator Rise, when that thing is taken down, it was a free for all. And there's kids that are playing in those skates. So that gate was a priority way back. So, I mean.
I'm hearing all this. I know you all know that we're here for a specific purpose tonight, but there are other concerns.
These are not inspiring confidence in any more development. All these issues that we're bringing up is not inspiring any confidence in further development.
Okay, I'm hearing that, so that's.
The other thing too, the R4 up there is actually now it's R3, right?
Correct.
Right. So how can you put in those high-rise developments or whatever, when the only access to that property is that little piece on Mead Road? Now what if there's a fire or some sort of an emergency, like that is not
we have another question over here. Sure.
My name's Dennis Gill. I spent 11 years in town council. I'm an engineer by training, and I'm sensing the frustration in the room. I mean, council and staff come in here and say they want to rezone from R3 to R4. They can't tell you how many units is allowed in R3. They have no concept of how many is allowed in R4. So are they changing it? The developer, and I'm not picking on him, but he said he could get 7 units at 7, 8, 56 at R3 existing. Why would you rezone it to R4 to get 64 more units?
Exactly.
And risk 400 units maybe, because they can't tell you how many they can develop. That's the frustration. You guys gotta tell them the numbers. How many units can be developed at R3? How many units can be developed at R4? And if I was on Hillcrest, that little strip going there, I would not allow access on Hillcrest.
And how high?
Thank you.
Just a point of clarification again. Mr. Kehoe, it isn't council and staff. Council is listening, but we have not, as a council, we have not made any decision. They don't work for me, they work for CAO, and CAO works for me, right? CAO does. Don't tell me what to do, sir. Thank you. Don't tell me what to do. I know what I'm doing. And you're no longer on council.
Thank you. So I'll try to keep it on a civil tone as much as we can. I know there's some heated issues.
Okay, so this exchange that we just had here about water, why are we having that exchange? There are laws. These people are building things. We now have water running down into these people's properties. Where is the net zero? Why is there water in 2024 with the laws that are in place right now by the province? Why is this happening? Like, seriously? Why is this happening? We don't have enough problems in town, we're gonna create more?
Thank you, and if I may stick my neck out a little bit, this goes back to an existing site plan approval process that took place. Yes, and the design has changed over the course of, since it started, and I hear you.
Okay, so my question is, I would like a definition for diversity. When we talk about developing that property, whoever is planning to do it. What do they mean by diverse?
You guys must be done. In terms of diversity of unit types? Diverse housing.
Well, diverse in ages is, you know, and also ethnicity, of course, and everything. And everybody's welcome in our developments. And right now we have townhouses that are good for families, and then we're building right now 3 bedrooms and 1 bedrooms. The 3 bedrooms will be good for families, you know, with 1 child kind of thing, and they're more on the 2nd and 3rd level. On the 1st floor, there'll be we have 4. We'll have 20 1-bedroom units on the ground floor with parking in front of the door, which will be really good for seniors. This is what's happening on currently. So for that site up there, and to answer some concerns from before, we realize that we haven't been perfect. We're just particular situations specific to certain people that we're happy to look after. And you know, certainly there's been a lot going on there. But the density aspect, I'd like to remind everybody, is that we're not really building more units, we're just making them dense to leave more space for walking, for the kids to play, for the dogs to walk around. Right now it looks rough. Of course, construction is very disruptive. There's a lot going on. But once we turn the key and walk away, we're going to have a park there. We're going to have community gardens. We're going to have some public spaces. We're going to have units for all different levels of income, all different ages. You know, we're renting now 1 bedrooms, too much for what we want to do. We want to lower that cost. So if we can build a unit where we can rent it for $1,000 a month, or that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to rethink development. In order to bring the cost down, we have to densify. And so if we can put a big building on the side of Mee Road, it'll be the least disruptive thing we can do for the community. The only house it would disrupt would be probably more the one that's on the right side on Mountain View, corner of Mee Road and Mountain View, and that is a rental house. So, yeah, it's being rented right now. No, I know, it's not perfect, but well, all I'm saying is that we'd be the least disruptive. If we build right now, we could build 7 or 8 plexes on that lot right now. If you can imagine the disruption that would happen there, we'd have to clear all the land, and there would be any more space, and then you'd have 7 or 8 people on Mountain View would have their views blocked. So right now what we're proposing is to put it in the corner, and so to leave everything else alone.
Those aren't condominiums then, they're rentals?
Rentals. We own all the lots, yes. Yeah, there's only one owner. Yeah. I'd like to point out too that when we bought the lot, it was already zoned R3 for multi-unit development. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
If I remember correctly, when that development of that large red area began, the idea was to build more of the units that are currently existing, but that didn't work out. So now you're changing your plan without a clear picture of where you're going. What if that plan doesn't work out and somebody else buys that property because you don't want to develop it or whatever? What would prevent another meeting like this with no information, no plans, no elevations? People could put anything on that land if we have another meeting that's going like this one is, a no information meeting. I think about the small little units on Exhibition Street by the prevention building. What would prevent somebody from buying the land you don't use and putting them there? All they would have to do is have another meeting like this.
I can speak to that since I'm right here. Somewhat. The process as it stands is that for rezoning, we don't require detailed design concepts or drawings.
This is a public information meeting.
Correct.
So this is a no information meeting.
Well, if the question is regarding detailed design, it's not required at this stage of the process. And that's just the way this particular system is set up at current.
Everybody bought all that land without some general idea.
To speak, I mean, Jeff.
We may do this, we may do that, or we may not.
So I'm Jeff Lawrence, I'm the CAO, and this is a rezoning. The developers could bring in any proposal they wanted. They could show it to you, it could meet all your criteria, and nothing would be able to stop them from withdrawing it and putting in something else at a later date. You're looking for an exact, that is the nature of rezoning. When you get to site plan approval, then they would have to put in specific design plans as to what they're going to do. And then the planning department would make sure that those design plans comply completely with what our rules are. But if you had a set of plans in front of you right now, I would be concerned as part of the rezoning, because you would be supporting it, and they would have every ability to withdraw it, to sell the land to somebody else that wanted to develop in a different way. And when you talk about how many units can fit on that 88,000 square feet or 1.75 acres, it depends on the design. It depends on the spacing requirements. So I can't say that exactly X units can fit on it. If they want to develop it, they're still required to submit very detailed plans to the planning department and have those reviewed. There is a notification requirement to residents for site plan approval, and it is appealable to council at that point in time. So
Why are we here now?
it is a provincial requirement, I believe.
Not a town.
We're here to consider whether this is an appropriate lot for the amount of density and whether this meets the priorities and objectives of council when it comes to housing.
No, it's not. I mean, the only opening is that little piece of land on Main Road.
So I wrote down the sizes. So there's 115-foot road frontage on Me Road, and there's 22 feet on the avenue itself. So that's plenty of room for emergency access and for driveway access. From my experience working with development and emergency services.
There's no, that red is all the building. That dark red.
I'm not talking about the red, I'm talking about the maroon color, that's 22 feet.
Yeah, so how, that's the only place you can get in there.
Do you see how the lot also fronts on Me Road? Darren, if you could point.
That's it, that's the access to that.
That is, and that's 115 foot of road frontage.
And you're gonna build tall buildings.
That absolutely meets the requirements for emergency vehicle access. I've done so many development, so yeah. From a distance perspective, that's not even questioned. They could do a design that would allow for emergency vehicle access based on that frontage.
That's a lot.
I just argued a little with this guy about how it's ridiculous to ask what they might want to build. I own a building, I own some land in another county. I know what I can build, and they know what I can build because of the rules and regulations and what you need for clearances and what you know, so it's a fair question to ask what you plan to build in there. Is it going to be 2 stories, 6 stories? Like, what are you planning to build in this 88,000 square feet? That's a fair question. You don't go into it hither-tither. He has a good idea of what his hopes and dreams are.
I'm not a design person, but I know there are some extra considerations that go into it, including the market environment, what kind of units can sell, determine what kind of units they're going to want to build.
Remember, this is to benefit them. Really it is. It is about, he's building to make a living. You're gonna build a building as cheaply as you can, as many apartments as you can get in there, and you're gonna rent them. Unless some other bigger guy comes along and says, hey, can I buy that from you?
That's okay. Yeah.
So my final comment that I would like to make, that's nice. Oh, okay, good then. My final comment that I'd like to make is when the initial development, before it began, when we first moved in, and I will say, like, Ian, no shade, I promise. Okay, you were so kind to talk to us about what we were potentially looking at. He did his best to estimate for us how close the building would be. He walked around with us. He was always so willing and happy to hold this for me. He was always so willing and happy to meet with us and talk about it. But one of my questions before it happened was, so I'd kind of like to get a feel in person. What does one of these buildings look like? And where could I go to see one? Like, is there somewhere I can go to look at this? And Ian said to me, like, not unless you go to the city. And I'm like, but I live in Kentville. Like, I don't want to live in the city. I don't want to feel like I live in the city. And the 3-story buildings to begin with made us feel like that. And I just don't want to feel like that. Like, I wouldn't have bought my house where I bought it if I wanted to feel like I lived in the city. And proceeding with this makes me feel like that is just amplified, like, a lot. That's all. That's all.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a multi-part question slash statement. You know, when you look at R3 zoning that you have right now, really, why try to push the limits of that land to increase to R4 to pack people in like sardines? You know, whether you're looking at a 60-unit apartment building on its own, or you're looking at the 30 to 40 tiny homes that we saw in another proposal that may happen. I mean, there's so many concerns when it comes to parking that number of people, the road frontage, how are you gonna manage snow removal in that small of a space when you've got umpteen dozen buildings packed into that long and narrow piece of land. And as someone who's had several issues when it comes to water flow and flooding on my property on Elizabeth Drive as a result of this development, I mean, you can hear the people in this room who have a lot of concerns about this upcoming development, and I know that we need more housing. That's a true fact, we all know it. But it has to be done in a responsible manner with appropriate water management plans in place before you break ground. I mean, when we saw the development come in Hubu Court initially, and the natural spring was unveiled with a large body of water that sat there for well over 2 years, you know, the pumping of that water that we saw come down Mead Road, the new pipe that went in under the end of Elizabeth Drive, which there was a swale installed on the corner that failed, that flooded out multiple properties. Homeowners have a reason to be concerned when development comes in around them. It can be scary, especially when there's a lot of misinformation and no communication. As someone who lives on Elizabeth Drive, I received no communication in the mailbox about this development. Everything came from speculation, and when you see the foundations suddenly appear. You know, they started off with a couple of townhouse buildings, and then rumor on the street was that, oh, the next buildings that go up might be apartments. Well, geez, how big are they gonna be? How many units are they going to have? So it causes a lot of confusion and questions among homeowners in the community when we don't receive any communication about what's to come. And then the developers can be hard to reach or hard to talk to. You know, we see on page 4 of this C&D community design pamphlet where they plan, says the water from the existing housing development in this section of the town flows through a natural swale towards Oakdean Park. Well, Oakdean Park is a fair distance away from this development, so do they want the water to move all the way through those communities to Oakdean Park uphill and potentially flood out that area? I mean, like, why aren't we looking at piping it down Mee Road to the Cornwallis River? Or, you know, we're not seeing plans in place to deal with the amount of water, and that's where the worry comes from existing homeowners. And I mean, yes, it does create concern when you have a full residential area of single dwelling homes and you look at putting high density housing in. Like, what's the reason for that? I mean, we see the rental prices of the townhomes that exist now at, you know, exceeding $2,800 a month with no utilities included. I don't know how you're going to be able to achieve a price that's going to be obtainable for students. I applaud you for wanting to build housing for the students at King's Tech. It's definitely needed, but I don't know how you could achieve a price point that is actually doable for students. You know, yes, we have a lot of worries now where we see the big fill that came in, and now all the water holding tanks that were installed there are now covered over. So, you know, I've always had the question of, we saw all the water holding tanks, so how do they empty? Where do they empty? Yeah, there's just been a lot of questions that have gone unanswered about it.
Thank you. I might not have answers for all these, but we are taking this down, so we're hearing it all. And council will hear it all as well. Any other questions, comments? down front there.
I just want to explain planning, because I think that that's the biggest confusion in this room. When we talk about zoning and what zoning is, there was a comment about how someone owns a piece of property and they know what's permitted on that piece of property. So Cogs owns a piece of property and they know what's permitted on that property because it's zoned R3. But you can come in and make a request to council for a rezoning. That is what is being considered here. And that is why we don't know what the final design is, because that's part of the process. That's how planning works in the entire province. The final design comes later on. And as part of the site plan approval process, a comprehensive stormwater management plan is a requirement, and the neighbor's notification is absolutely a requirement. And if the neighbors had an issue with the natural and engineered elements of that stormwater management plan, which they would receive in the mail as part of the final design when it comes through, that could be appealed to council, and council could ask further questions. They could make changes to that stormwater management plan, or they could decline the development. That's how this works. And that's where we're at in this process. It's very early, and what we're talking about is looking at making affordable housing, because what you just said is $2,800 a month is not affordable to someone on a low income budget. So the way to do that is to create much greater density, and I don't know what that looks like, but we do have significant requirements within the planning documents. Your council has been thought very critically when it comes to their site plan criteria. That's why I read it to you at the very beginning and put it in place, because that's the process where you get all this information that you're asking for now. It comes through the site plan approval process. Right now, we're just asking, does it make sense to have high density there? Does it meet council's objectives? And as a planner, it's my job to look at your planning documents and look at what council's statements are and decide if the development that has been proposed meets that. So I'm just gonna read to you the objectives of your council when it comes to residential development. The first is to meet the mandate of the province relating to housing opportunities for all of Kentville's citizens, particularly for those citizens of low to moderate income. 2, to provide a variety of housing types to accommodate the various needs and desires of town residents. 3, to protect the character and development form of established residential neighborhoods. 4, to encourage residential infill development on appropriate underutilized lands. 5, to ensure the future residential development occurs in suitable locations with adequate water, sewer, sanitary sewer, stormwater, transportation, and recreation services available. 6, to actively promote and facilitate the development of housing within the town in order to attract a greater proportion of the region's housing market. And 7, to encourage the conservation, retention, and improvement of the existing housing stock. So that is my understanding of what this application was intended for and why we are looking at it and considering it by council at this point in time. So diverse housing type can be different styles of homes, it can be different types of ownership, it can be different types of rental pricing, it can be a whole bunch of different things. And we have a developer who is suggesting that they would like to do some kind of different approach that would meet some of these objectives of council, and that is why it's being considered here tonight. Now, council also has that site plan criteria in place, and that's intended to protect the neighborhood. So some of those objectives I read are about making sure that the future residential development occurs in suitable locations with adequate waters, sanitary sewer, storm sewer, transportation, and recreational services available. It's about encouraging the conservation and improvement of existing neighborhood stock, so making sure that the development itself fits within the neighborhood. So when the final design comes forward, that is how the planning staff are going to be critically thinking about this development and ensuring that it does meet those needs. And then as a fallback and a support, you as the residents will be notified. You will have every document that we have looked at, including the stormwater management plan, which will be a requirement. And if there are any concerns, you can appeal it to your council. So that's the process, and that's what we're talking about, and that's how planning works. We are just at such an early stage in this process. We're just really talking about this concept of whether it would make sense to have a higher density in this area.
But you created a neighborhood within a neighborhood. Because those buildings that just went in the R3 do not fit the residential area around it. You took a field and they created a neighborhood that now the new neighborhood, like this is.
Council designated that area for for medium density residential because of its location to commercial. That's my understanding. That's based on the statements within your planning documents.
The neighborhood is now saying that it doesn't, we don't think it fits. So you've asked us our opinion, the neighborhood is saying, we don't think it fits.
Absolutely, and that's what the question is for your councilors right now.
As far as the site approval process goes, did it fail the first time because of all this flooding? So why are we trusting it the second time?
I really can't answer to a different development. It came through as a different site plan approval. You would have been notified as well. You could have appealed that one. That's part of the process.
I think the process failed the first time, we don't want it the second time.
So if there's flooding issues, I absolutely would recommend that you let your municipal council know and your town staff, because part of a site plan approval and the stormwater management plan that would have been submitted as part of that is that they are held to it. So if there's an issue, then that can be addressed. I would like you to know that. That's part of it.
So,
Yeah.
So the R4, the area that you want R4, why can't it be R3? It is. Okay, so why can't you develop it?
They're looking at creating a development that is more affordable than what is existing in the R3 now.
With R3?
Because they wouldn't be able to get the density appropriate from a development perspective with construction costs to offer units at the rate available.
Right, so the land is worth nothing then unless you change it to R4.
Not necessarily. They could go in and they could put in a development based on R3 that's acceptable, that would be higher cost of living to the residents. That would be a different type of development. Until we have an actual design, exactly, and the cost of living there is not affordable.
Well, it's wonderful to some people, obviously, because they're all rented.
So when you asked earlier about what a diverse housing type looks like, this is what it looks like.
Well, no, you're saying the diversity is going to be.
Part of it is the cost of rental.
Housing, honestly, like, I mean, I'm not against student
But
housing.
originally, when the land was sold, it was supposed to be condos. Yeah, so then we went from condos to apartments, now apartments to R4. Like, actually, that land, that little strip of land was just for sale. What, 2 or 3 months ago? Obviously, it didn't sell. So now we're doing this. What's next?
Well, we're looking at what's here today.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, okay.
that could change when we get to design.
It comes down to the almighty buck. I mean, what they're trying to build, they're trying to make the most money off it. And I think by building a high rise with lots of apartments must be a better success rate.
One
You know?
roof, one foundation.
Quite frankly, I don't want a lot of rentals in our neighborhood. I like single dwelling homes.
It just changes the nature of the neighborhood.
Yeah, all noted.
And I mean, council does represent the town.
Indeed.
This is, we're to be reminded, council will decide, well, hey, council is supported by, a few councilmen, they're not paying all the town taxes.
To be fair, it represents all of us.
Pardon me?
To be fair, it represents all of us.
Yes, exactly.
We're property owners, so we pay our taxes as well. So we should be fairly represented as well.
You
We
are,
should be-
aren't you?
Well, not what you said. You said
I'm
you're
saying
representing
councilmen are representing the town.
all of us, right? I agree.
I'm not saying you're not representing the East Boston, but I,
And I apologize, I've been several a lot, but I have to disagree with the gentleman back here who said every single day conservation again. That's so far from the truth. So far from the truth. You're purporting to know who we are and our motivations, and you're so wrong. So it's a bit of an insult to say what you think our motivations are when you don't know. I think it's fair.
Are you a not-for-profit or free?
Just to clarify.
Sure.
On R3, how many units are you going to build?
It depends on the size of the lot.
On the lot that's there now,
The max is the 8. You can go to 8.
What is this R4, the sky's the limit? Okay, that is the bottom line.
you're going to build 8 units per building. So how many units in that property? 8 units?
Per building. And you can do multiple buildings.
But how many buildings are in that property? How many units can you put in there?
You'd have to, again, that's a design question.
That's something someone should have already on hand.
Well, there's a maximum that's what the purpose of the land use bylaw is, to set the maximum, a ceiling for it. There's different ways of configuring a design that can change that, but, and I'm not one to speak to it, I'm not a designer.
What's the ceiling on R4?
Okay, Ian, how many units can you build in your R3?
Was it units for 10,000 square feet?
64 units, 8 times 8.
So why are you trying to squeeze 6 more?
No,
No, you want to go 30 to 60.
As of right, we 8 times 8 is 64. As an R4 right now.
Yeah, but on R4, you're only allowed 60 units.
Which is less.
The reason why we want density is to lower the cost of construction, so we can lower the cost of housing. That's the reason.
Change it into 64.
A large multi-unit building is cheaper to build than 8 times 8 unit buildings. There's a big difference.
So then with the 64 unit building, is your plan to go higher?
So that's going to pass on 60 and 80.
Well, there's a limit based on the lot size.
So what's the maximum?
I'd have to do the calculation.
The answer is sorry.
We do get to that when we get to the site plan approval process. Not this evening, no, it's a different process. Rezoning is a different process than site plan approval. Anyone else?
Was there a ceiling on R4? Just based on, there's no real ceiling, it's just based as long
Lot
as the
size.
building meets certain criteria on the property and you have access, that's your ceiling, right?
I think we need like 1.5 parking spots per unit. So that brings it to 90 parking spaces plus the alleyways and the road and the driveways. So, you know, I don't think we can do more than 60 there. Like it's really, at some point, we would never do that there, no. That's not, too expensive.
So there's a number of limiting factors when it comes to determining the maximum unit count. So parking is one of them. Land use bylaw is another. Building code is another.
Me again. Hello, everybody. I'm just wondering if there's anyone who is in the room who could add any clarification to this. Maybe a rumor, I don't know, so that's why I'm asking. I'm just wondering, is there any current plans in progress or in discussion of NSCC building their own student housing? Anybody know if that's fact or fiction or? So NSCC has, sorry, would you like to? Oh, no.
Officially.
Oh, no.
Does anyone, I can't speak to that officially because I'm not aware, but. Okay. 1 second.
Thank you. Mayor Sandra Snow. NSCC Kings Tech is one of the the sites in this province where they are planning to build student housing. And they already have the property. If you know the site, you know where the horticultural area is, and then there's this old shacky house that they bought. That house is going to go, and that's where their student housing is, up that driveway is where their student housing is planned. And I think Ackerley is the first site that's getting the housing right, like there's actually building right now, and I think we're second or third on the list.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Are there grants and such out there for building these affordable houses that will come back to the town in any way in the builder?
Do you guys speak to grants for affordable housing? There are programs. Yeah.
Thank you, Travis Mills here. The only way for us to build at all right now is using CMHC programs, and they're based almost entirely around energy efficiency and affordability. So it's actually a requirement for us to receive funding that's appropriate enough for us to successfully build. And that's why you're not seeing a lot of single-family dwellings going up these days. It's mostly multifamily because that's the agenda. And we're simply following the agenda. And I would also say that there's probably some population growth going on in this town. I don't know if one of you guys can comment on that, but I mean, I've heard estimates that it's 2 to 3% per year. I think Kentville has 6,000 or 8,000 people, so that's 160 people a year coming in here, and it's on average 2 per dwelling, so that's 80 units. So another question to the town is, were 80 units built here last year? I don't think so. I mean, we built 18.
I would want more information.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just...
This way to, because 80 units, 80 more people, if that's what
160 people.
160
Yeah.
people divided into families, and they have to be professionals. They're not interested in affordable housing. So it's not, you can't just grab numbers out of the air like that.
Well, they're true numbers. There is a population growth happening, you know. Yeah. I think the question as to what the people are targeting is what is available. So I have rentals in Wolfville as well, and you'd be surprised. Probably your opinion would change if you took a stroll through some of these developments to see who is renting. I don't know if it's a choice based on a lifestyle they're seeking or if it's the only thing available. I don't ask, but I have doctors, lawyers, teachers, you name it, in apartment buildings.
Sometimes it's transitional,
Yeah, could be transitional to get to the house.
but it's still needed housing.
Thank you. We've reached silence. Well, if there are no further questions, again, we do have this committee. I can't remember my committees anymore, apologies. So there's a committee meeting this Friday before recommendation would go forward next weekend for council to consider it at first reading. So that's our first immediate steps. Again, if it continues down the line, we get to a public hearing later in the month. And again, that'll be an opportunity for everyone to speak directly to council for that. In the meantime, we'll be collecting information if there are comments or questions. Send them through my office or through Caroline, and we'll take those forward as well, as we will with the body of this conversation tonight. So there'll be opportunities for now and in the future as well to discuss